This is WLIW 21, New York. Member-supported public television.
Look, the bottom line here is congestion pricing is a scam. It is nothing more than a money grab that the MTA put in place to try and raise $1 billion of revenue so that it could borrow $15 billion to run its mismanaged operations. You know what they could start with to get funds? Actually enforcing the fare. They lose $700 million a year to fare jumpers who refuse to pay to ride the subway system. Yes, I would fight to get more funds, but there needs to be better management, and New York State needs to actually enforce the law and ensure that those that ride the MTA actually pay to ride it.
Mr. Jones, would you lead a fight in Washington for more money for the MTA?
Of course I would lead a fight in Washington for more money for the MTA, even as my opponent has already gone on the record voting against transportation funding. Here's the thing. I think the first ad that I saw in this campaign by Mike Lawler was him taking credit for Kathy Hochul pausing congestion pricing, which is obviously an issue that is dealt with at the state level. He doesn't want to talk about his record in Congress at the federal level. I mean, this is a guy who was voted on 10 different occasions to restrict access to abortion, on 19 different occasions and counting against protecting Social Security
straight-up lie
and Medicare. In fact, on September 29th...
You cannot provide one single vote.
Oh, I would love to.
You cannot provide
If you stop
one
talking, I can answer the question.
Oh,
on
please,
on September 29th, 2023, for example, among other examples, Mike Lawler voted for a budget that would have reduced access to Social Security. It would have caused the Social Security Administration to have closed 200... I'm talking, Mike. To close 240 offices, or otherwise cut their hours. This is one of dozens of votes, as I mentioned. Here's the thing. He also wants to raise the age of retirement, which is a cut to the benefits of seniors in our congressional district.
Mr. Jones,
seniors like my grandmother who had to work past the age of retirement just to pay for the high cost of living in the lower Hudson Valley because of him.
Look, I introduced legislation in the state legislature to repeal congestion pricing. As a member of Congress, I worked with Democrat Josh Gottheimer to block congestion pricing from taking effect. When Mondaire Jones up and left our district and ran down for Congress in Brooklyn, you know what he said? His personal policy preference is for congestion pricing. You cannot believe one thing that comes out of his mouth, because he absolutely has tried to reverse every single policy he supported in 2020 because he knows it is not popular in our district today. But the fact is, he has supported these policies, and they are a disaster for taxpayers and commuters in New York.
One more.
Yeah, so much like his mentor and the guy he's supporting for president of the United States for the third consecutive time, Mike Lawler lies effortlessly, without reservation, without hesitation, without remorse. Even the clip that he points to as evidence of my support for unfettered congestion pricing is taken out of context, because in that same debate, if he were to air that portion of it, you would see that I call for an exemption for the lower Hudson Valley, which is a community that meets my threshold of lacking adequate public transportation. I grew up in Rockland County. I know what it's like not to have a one-seat ride.
I'm sorry, when you were running for Congress in Brooklyn, you called for an exemption for the lower Hudson Valley?
You're melting down right now, interrupting me.
Gentlemen, we're going to move on. You're out of time, sir. Thank you. Another question here from someone who lives in the district. Let's listen.
I'm really concerned about the misinformation that's going around about Proposition 1. It's about people's equal rights and protecting their rights.
So Proposition 1, it's on the New York State ballot. It's also known as the Equal Rights Amendment. It's going to enshrine the right to abortion in the New York Constitution. As a New York resident, will you vote for it, Mr. Jones?
I absolutely will vote for Proposition 1, because we need to do what we can here in the state of New York to enshrine protections for women's basic freedom to make their own health care decisions. You know, since Mike Lawler and Donald Trump got their way and the right to an abortion was overturned after being constitutionally recognized for 50 years, we have seen abortion bans in nearly half the states in America go into place. And this isn't something that just happens outside of the state of New York. You know, speak to Beth in Nyack, who has to cross off the names of colleges and universities on a list of where her daughter can even apply to college based on whether those states have an abortion ban. Mike Lawler is rabidly anti-choice. He always votes to restrict access to abortion. He's done it on at least 10 different occasions and counting. He told the Journal News, our flagship publication, that he'd like to see nearly all abortions in New York eliminated. And he would absolutely be a reliable vote for a national abortion ban. He is sincerely extreme on this subject, and he has disdain for women and their ability to make their own health care decisions.
The only one who has disdain for women is you. You called the first female governor of the state of New York the same word as what is referred to as a female dog. So don't lecture anybody about respect for women. You're a disgrace. The bottom line here is this. Proposition 1 is way more expansive than the issue of abortion. Abortion rights are codified into law in New York. They are not changing. I am not seeking to change them. I've been very clear. I will not support a federal ban on abortion at any point. So he continues to lie. The Wall Street Journal called it flat out false.
Oh, with the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal says it must be true, right?
Proposition, well, it is. And if you actually read the Wall Street Journal, maybe you'd understand economics. This proposition goes well beyond the issue of abortion. It would take away parental rights. It would allow non-citizens the ability to vote and provide them with certain rights and benefits in this state, which, as we've seen in New York, is a complete disaster as the state spends billions of dollars on illegal immigrants. And it would allow boys, biological boys, to play in girls' sports. Period.
Thank you.
It is wrong, and I will not support it.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to move on here. Mr. Lawler, the day after Israel killed Yahya Sinwar, the man who plotted that attack on October 7th that included Americans taken hostage, you introduced a bill that would deny American aid to nations that take Americans hostage or otherwise detain them. Could this make it more difficult to end the war in Gaza? Because clearly American aid would be part of the peace package for the Palestinians.
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Hamas is who is responsible for this situation in Gaza. Hamas is a terrorist organization that killed innocent Israelis and Americans on October 7th. They took hundreds of Israelis and Americans hostage. There are still 7 Americans remaining hostage, 4 presumed living, 3 deceased. The fastest way for a ceasefire to occur, the fastest way for this conflict to come to an end, is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. If they are holding our American citizens hostage, why would we ever provide American taxpayer money to provide relief? If and until they release our hostages, we're not doing that, and we shouldn't. I have been a staunch supporter of Israel. I have been staunch in my defense of them, passing legislation, including the Special Envoy for the Abraham Accords, to ensure that Arab-majority nations normalize relations with Israel. Then and only then can there be peace in the Middle East. But so long as other nations funded by Iran want to destroy the state of Israel, then it is very difficult to actually get the peace that you are talking about.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
October 7th was the worst assault on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. I continue in my record of strongly defending Israel's right to exist and to defend itself against terror threats, whether they emanate from Hamas, a terrorist organization that must be defeated and that still has over 100 hostages, including American hostages, or Hezbollah. Look, Sinwar had to be eliminated. This is a terrorist organization that we're talking about when we talk about Hezbollah. And in Congress, I was proud to have a record of voting for every single appropriations bill containing security assistance and other aid to Israel, including standalone supplemental appropriations bills for the purpose of replenishing Iron Dome. I've been to an Iron Dome facility myself in Sderot on the border of Gaza. I understand how critically important that program is. We have to continue to stand with Israel, while, of course, making sure that we minimize the loss of innocent lives in Gaza and finally get to a place where once Hamas is defeated, we arrive at a 2-state solution that allows both Israelis and Palestinians to live in dignity.
Thank you, Mr.
Do you support your supporters, the SEIU's plea for an arms embargo against Israel? Do you support that?
I absolutely do not.
So you reject that?
I absolutely
would you denounce their statement right now?
Can I answer your question?
Would you denounce their statement?
Congressman, can I answer your question?
I asked you a question.
Are you grandstanding? Are you going to keep interrupting me? Because it's actually a fairly simple question.
You voted 4 times you voted 4 times against Iron Dome.
So we can move on, please.
You voted 4 times against Iron Dome.
His consultants are telling him to talk over me for the sake of scoring cheap and fraudulent political points.
You voted 4 times against Iron Dome. home, and your
That is not
supporters
true. And it's actually
continue
one
to
of the more
oppose
despicable
Okay,
lies that you...
guys,
Okay,
we're going to move on.
We're going to have to move on.
We're going to move on.
Excuse me, gentlemen.
including the SEIU. Will you denounce the SEIU?
We're going to move on.
Gentlemen, we're going to move on.
One of the
We're
more
going to-
despicable
we're
lies that
going
you've
to
heard in this
move on.
campaign
Mr.
is him
Jones, we're
accusing
going
you
to move
falsely of
on.
voting
We're
for
going to
China.
move on
You
now.
voted 4 times.
We're
in the
going to
NDA.
move on now. And the next question is to you, Mr. Jones. In an early position paper, you favored a two-state solution, a return to pre-1967 borders, which could affect Israeli settlements. You also called for Jerusalem to be the capital of both Israel and the Palestinian state. Do you still believe that? And what's your solution to the Mideast crisis? You have a minute, and let's try to stay to the minute.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Listen, I stand with Israelis and Palestinians who want to see a lasting peace and security in the region. That includes a two-state solution. Part of that has to involve some kind of land swap. That is negotiated in the form of diplomacy, but you know what can't happen?
So are you,
know why
saying,
that can't
are you
happen?
saying that some of the settlements are going to have to be dismantled?
In the West Bank?
Yes.
Settlement expansion under Bibi Netanyahu has
Yes.
been inappropriate. Yes, if that's the question that's being asked of
Well,
me.
the question
But
is
you
if
previously said 1967. Is that what you want to go back to, before 1967?
Listen, there has to be a negotiated agreement between Israelis and Palestinians that arrives at a two-state solution, one that allows Israelis to live in peace and in security and the right to their own Jewish homeland, and Palestinians to live in dignity.
And is that the pre-1967 borders?
Look, that's going to be subject to negotiation between Israelis and Palestinians. There is a role for the United States to play.
Mr. Lawler?
I'm baffled, truly. You just said you are a staunch supporter of Israel,
I am.
and yet you are calling for a negotiated settlement and land swaps? Are you out of your mind? Look,
How do you think you arrived?
The
What
bottom
is your
line
two-state
here is
solution look like?
Iran,
What
the
does your
greatest
two-state
state
solution look
sponsor
like, Mike?
of terror. Well, the two-state solution starts with Arab majority nations recognizing Israel's right
I
to
agree-
exist
I agree with that.
and normalizing relations.
I agree with
Iran is the greatest state sponsor of terror. They continue to fund Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Palestinian Authority.
You were telling me things I know.
Yeah, that's great, but clearly you don't understand it.
No.
The Palestinian Authority, continues to do pay to slay. They pay Palestinians to go kill Jews. And you're talking about land swaps and that Israel needs to acquiesce to go back to 1967
That is not what I'm
lines?
saying.
Yes, it is.
It's not what I'm saying.
Yes,
Do I
it
have to-
is.
Can I rebut this?
We have a rebuttal, and we're going to move on right after this.
I so appreciate this. So this isn't.
You only have 30 seconds.
This is where he mischaracterizes my record, tells me things that I already know, even as he understands I've been a staunch supporter of Israel's right to exist and to defend itself. How do you think you arrive at a two-state solution if not some kind of negotiated agreement between Palestinians and Israelis? Nothing about that undermines the safety and security of the Jewish people in Israel.
Okay.
And he is mischaracterizing my record
The
and my
only way
statements
for
on
a
this.
two-state solution to work is for Arab majority nations to normalize relations with Israel, starting with Saudi Arabia. Then and only then can there be a two-state solution. But you're talking about land swaps and going back to pre-1967 lines. Everybody just watched this. Your entire argument that you
I
support
am
Israel
not-
just blew up in your face.
No, it didn't.
Gentlemen,
You
we have to move
mischaracterized it.
on. Maurice?
All right, guys, thank you. Mr. Lawler, when it comes to the photo of you wearing dark makeup to look like Michael Jackson, you've defended yourself by saying you're a big fan of his, and you meant it as a tribute. Are you telling us that in 2006, you had no idea that blackface has a long history as a symbol of hate?
Well, obviously, I understand that blackface has a long history of symbol of hate, and minstrel shows were done to demean, make fun of, besmirch Black Americans. And that's absolutely not what I was doing. In 2006, when I dressed up in a Halloween dance contest as a sophomore at Manhattan College. I understand why people are offended, and I apologize for that. And obviously today, that's not something I would do. But Van Jones, one of his own supporters, went on CNN that night and said, this is not blackface. This is not historical minstrel shows meant to degrade Black Americans, and it's a distraction from the real issues impacting Black Americans, from the affordability crisis to public safety to the migrant crisis and the impact that has on our economy and our workforce. So for me, I understand why people are upset about it. I apologize for it. But no, that was not done as an effort to demean or make fun of. Michael Jackson was my musical idol. People know that about me. They've known that for a very long time. And still today, an Andy Warhol painting of Michael Jackson hangs in my office.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah,
Jones,
that was the most incoherent, internally inconsistent non-apology I've heard. Look, on one hand, he says he's sorry, but then he says it wasn't really blackface because Van Jones is saying it's not blackface. Here's the thing. This is part of a pattern. As obvious as it was in 2006 that blackface was deeply offensive, it has been reported by Politico that on 2 different occasions in recent weeks, he has failed the test of leadership when it comes to race. Okay, he hosted an event where someone used the N-word. He didn't push back on that, didn't even acknowledge that it was used in his presence. He did an interview where the host said there's no such thing as white supremacy, but there is such thing as black supremacy. He didn't push back on that. He didn't do the NAACP candidates forum. One of the things that the Spring Valley and Nyack branches of the NAACP have criticized as being an aberration among any candidate running for Congress of the past several decades. It is really important that we have a member of Congress representing the 17th Congressional District who's committed to representing our beautiful diversity that we see in our district, regardless
Jones,
of...
your time is up, and now we're going to move to another question.
Mr. Lawler needs a second to respond to that. No, you're good? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jones, when you first ran for Congress, you ran as a progressive. Then you moved to Brooklyn, and some say you ran as even more progressive. Now you're running in the 17th District as a moderate. Which is it? Which Mondaire Jones will represent the voters in Washington if you win? Will the real Mondaire Jones please stand up?
Yeah, I would push back on that characterization. It sounds like something right out of a Fox News playbook. Here's the thing. When redistricting resulted in a disastrous process that impacted the 17th Congressional District, I was proud to continue to run as my authentic self. Marcia, can I answer your question?
But you're changing your positions.
Oh, what positions have I changed?
Marcia, I agree. He hasn't changed his positions. He still is that same radical socialist.
Marcia, you know, he falsely accuses me of wanting to defund the police, but when I was in Congress, I voted for record levels of police funding and never, not once, voted to reduce law enforcement funding. He tries to, in the 11th hour, suggest that somehow my support for Israel is not the ironclad support that has existed throughout my tenure in Congress and my existence in public life. And yet, when I first ran for Congress in 2020, I was pro-Israel. So what are these changes that people are saying occurred after my time in Congress? I always stood up for law enforcement. I voted for record levels of border security. This is the guy blocking the border security legislation. I would just ask that members of the press bring more nuance to this conversation.
Mr. Lawler,
okay. I agree with Mondaire Jones. He hasn't changed his positions. He still supports defunding the police. He still supports cashless bail. He called himself a socialist.
That's not true.
He voted to increase spending by $5 trillion. He was endorsed by AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. He supported Bernie Sanders over Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential primary.
That's not true either.
Yes, it is.
I never endorsed him.
Joe Biden wasn't progressive enough.
I never endorsed him.
At the end of the day, Mondaire Jones is a radical. He called all cops racist and white supremacists. He called ICE agents terrorists.
Okay,
he wanted to allow cop killers and rapists the right to vote from prison.
We're going to have to move on.
Bottom line is, I agree with Mondaire Jones. He has not changed his positions at all. And in fact, last week in an interview with Brian Lehrer, he said, "Show me any position I've changed." I agree. You haven't.
In Congress, I was a pragmatist, and I stood up to the extremes, whether it was my support for law enforcement, my support for border security, including record levels of appropriations money to secure our border, and any of the other nonsense that he is talking about, including things that he's taking out of context from before I was ever elected to Congress in the first place. I never called all cops racist.
Yes, you did.
I never called ICE agents terrorists.
Yes, you did.
But here's the thing. You're gonna hear lies from him throughout the evening, as I mentioned earlier. He lies just like his mentor, Donald Trump. And he's doing it to hold on to power so that he's in place next January to vote for Donald Trump's Dangerous Project 2025 agenda.
Mr. Jones, I wanted to go to, we've heard from voters about concerns regarding the economy and specifically about Social Security and Medicare. Let's listen to what they had to say.
How would Congress be able to help with housing affordability within New York State?
Now, Mr. Jones, since Social Security and Medicare are scheduled to run out of money in 2036, And since the money coming in from payroll and other taxes would only produce about 77% of the funds that would be needed, what should we do?
Yeah.
Should we cut benefits by 23%?
No.
Should we raise more taxes? Should we change the retirement age? What would be your solution for making sure that people get Medicaid, or would you want to end it altogether? I mean, Social Security and Medicaid.
Seniors deserve to retire in dignity. Lower Hudson Valley residents are wondering whether they're going to be able to retire with benefits that they earned into a Social Security trust, for example, that they spent their lives paying into.
So what should be the solution to save it?
I'm answering. I get 1 minute, don't I?
You do.
Okay. And so my record and my position in this race is that of asking people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, my opponent's biggest backer in this congressional race, to pay more, to pay their fair share in taxes so that American seniors can retire in dignity. My opponent has an abysmal record on this. My opponent, Mike Lawler, supports raising the age of retirement. That's a cut to hard-earned benefits for people in the lower Hudson Valley. It is despicable, and it shows how out of touch he is. And it's why I say you can't keep him in Congress, because with Mike Johnson at the helm, the speaker he said he proudly voted for, who has said he wants cuts to Social Security and Medicare, and Donald Trump poised to return to the White House, you are going to see those cuts that Mike Lawler supports, including raising the age of retirement. That would be devastating
Mr.
for us.
Lawler, how about you? What's your solution for saving Social Security and Medicare?
First of all, there have been 0 votes in this Congress to cut Social Security and Medicare, and in fact, the opposite. At every turn, we have protected Social Security and Medicare from any cuts. But you know what the biggest cut facing Social Security is?
But Mr. Lawler, wait.
The cost of inflation. That is the biggest cut facing Social Security. The cost of groceries, the cost of utilities, the cost of housing. Our seniors are being crushed under the weight of these rising costs. That is a result of Mondaire Jones' disastrous policies. Now, I understand firsthand the impact of Social Security. When my dad died from cancer 11 years ago, he was relying on Social Security disability after paying into that system for years. My grandparents lived on Social Security and Medicare. They relied on those programs. I have been very clear. I will not cut those programs. Yes, we have to address this challenge in a bipartisan way. Both programs are going to go broke in the next 10 years. Mondaire Jones can demagogue all he wants, but this requires a bipartisan solution. And he is not someone who is capable of doing that. He has proven that over and over again. He rated 381st in bipartisanship. I've rated 4th. I have never voted to cut Social Security, and I will not.
Thank you. 15 seconds. And we have to
Mike
move on.
Lawler has voted on 19 different occasions and counting against protecting Social Security and Medicare.
That is a straight
He just refused to disavow his position supporting raising the age of retirement, so we got him dead to rights on that. But it's not the first time that he's had to not disavow something that's very clearly stated by him, which is that he wants to raise the age of retirement. It's despicable. It's out of touch. And seniors in the lower Hudson Valley cannot afford him in Congress in January.
We're going to move on. We're going to move on here, guys. Another concern we heard from the voters has to do with the rising cost of housing. Let's listen.
How would Congress be able to help with housing affordability within New York State?
Some data here. Across the state, home prices have increased 39% over the last 4 years. Many young people feel that home ownership is out of their reach. 2 parts here. What would you do to make housing more affordable in the district? And how old were you when you bought your first home?
Thank you. I was 28 years old when I bought my first home. Housing affordability is a major crisis. We live in the highest taxed counties in America, in Rockland, Westchester, Putnam counties. I have made raising the cap on SALT my top priority because obviously tax relief is critically important for property homeowners. The bottom line here is this. Under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, housing costs have risen dramatically. The average mortgage cost is up over $1,000 a month in Rockland and Westchester counties, up over $800 a month in Putnam and Dutchess counties. I just rolled out a housing plan last week, 209 pages, 39 different provisions to address housing affordability, including workforce housing, affordable housing, reducing the barriers and cost of construction, dealing with the challenges pertaining to HUD and their administration of programs, rent control laws, which are crushing New York City's housing stock here, 50,000 vacant units because of that, increasing the low-income housing tax credit.
Thank you.
So there's a lot we can do and should do from a federal level to incentivize the development of housing while respecting local control of zoning.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, it was 2017 when I bought my first condo. I don't know how old I was at the time off the top of my head. But here's the thing. We have to do something about the housing affordability crisis in the lower Hudson Valley. I know this personally. I grew up housing insecure. In Section 8 housing, and we needed food stamps still to get by. And my mom had to work multiple jobs just to be able to provide for our family. One of the things we need to do is fully restore the state and local tax deduction, which has been capped at $10,000, crushing middle-class households in the lower Hudson Valley. Since Mike Lawler and Donald Trump got their way, he got his president elected. Donald Trump returned the favor with the support of Republican majorities in the House and in the Senate at capping that deduction at $10,000. Now he wants to say he's a champion for fully restoring the SALT deduction. It's why I say there's not a problem he claims to be trying to solve that he's not responsible in some way, shape, or form for helping to create in the first place.
Okay, we're going to move on here, guys.
Well, I'd like to respond.
10 seconds.
Yeah, the problem here is this is the guy that's now advocating for the largest tax increase in American history by allowing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to fully expire and wants to raise the corporate tax rate to 28%.
So you would renew the cap at $10,000?
No, I wouldn't renew the cap.
Because that was part of the December 2017 tax cuts.
I said
that you're saying you want to renew.
You want them to fully expire. I've been very clear that the bottom line is we need to lift the cap on SALT. You want to provide the largest tax increase in American history. It's pathetic.
Thank you both. We're going to move on here. Mr. Lawler, what's your message to the thousands of Haitian Americans who live and work in the district and feel like targets of hate now? And they now fear for their safety after former President Trump repeated that false information we're all now familiar with about Haitians eating dogs and cats in Ohio.
Look, I was the first Republican to speak out against those statements. I am proud to represent the second largest Haitian diaspora per capita. I have worked tirelessly to support our Haitian community, to work with them on issues impacting the community locally, as well as addressing the challenges on the ground in Haiti. 40% of the Haitian people live in the United States. They are part of this community, part of this country. They contribute greatly to our economy, and they are welcome here.
What are you telling specifically
and I've been
about
very,
this
I've
situation?
been very clear that those comments were wrong. I have gone into the Haitian community numerous times over the last many weeks, and we continue to work closely with leaders within the Haitian community. I'm proud of the fact that 2 staff members of mine are Haitian, speak Creole, work tirelessly to address the challenges of our constituents, and I will continue to do that.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, Mike Lawler still refuses to call out Donald Trump and J.D. Vance by name when it comes to the despicable lie that Haitian people somehow are eating cats and dogs. It's a despicable lie that caused over 33 different bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio, and that caused classes to have to be canceled on multiple occasions. I rallied with the Haitian community in my hometown of the village of Spring Valley 2 Sundays ago, and people are hurting. People are hurting. I mean, for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to put a target on their backs, and for their member of Congress to be so cowardly, to be so afraid of Donald Trump, as he always has been, to call him out by name, and instead say that everyone just needs to tone down the rhetoric, as though the rhetoric isn't coming from Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and other Republican leaders, is not only dishonest, it's despicable and it's disqualifying. And it's yet another piece of evidence that he should not be in Congress next January.
Mr. Jones, let's move on. Do you think we should change the labor laws so that migrants have a faster route to getting work papers? Last year, for example, Governor Hochul said the state identified more than 18,000 job openings with nearly 400 employers willing to hire migrants. So why not help asylum seekers, get these jobs?
Well, look, let's be very clear that if claims of asylum are judged to be invalid, those people are not legally here. Let me start by laying that foundation. While people are here waiting for their asylum claims to be adjudicated, it seems to me that it makes sense for people to be contributing and to avoid the public coffers going towards paying for their cost of living that they would be paying for their own cost of living by taking on jobs. So do I think that the red tape needs to be improved or otherwise facilitated in terms of migrants being able to work as they wait for their claims to be adjudicated? Sure. And that's what employers, including small business owners, are also saying.
Mr. Lawler.
What you didn't hear there is that he doesn't disagree with the fact that they shouldn't be here in the first place. The bottom line is the asylum and parole process needs to be reformed. People should be applying for asylum in their country of origin or the next closest country of safe passage. They should not be pouring across the border, being detained under catch and release, processed, and then released into the United States. 90% of the 10.5 million people have been released into the United States. This is why we're dealing with this crisis. So just incentivizing more behavior like that by giving work authorizations and speeding up the process for work authorization while not reforming the asylum